Hello, I'm Abigail DeJarnatt.
My name is Allison Lind.
I'm your host, Grant May.
My name's Noelle Fitchett.
And welcome
back
to the Counteract Podcast. All right, welcome back to the Counteract Podcast. I'm Abigail DeJarnatt, and today we're going to be talking about some things that have been coming up in my cell. This is more of a ladies only conversation. Sorry guys, you can totally listen, but we're just going to be talking about some of the questions and trends that we saw from election results, but more importantly, biblical femininity. And it seems like, oh my gosh, another biblical femininity episode. Apparently this is we're just going to keep talking about it until we don't have questions about it anymore, which may be never, but it's really important conversation to have. Also, my hand is still broken. It's been a long time. It's really annoying. This is maybe the most annoying brace that I possibly could have been assigned for this particular break. I didn't really explain what happened on the podcast. So just for fun, because you know, just for fun, here's the story of my hand. Basically, I was helping my mom with one of the musicals that she directs because, you know, I love my mom. I'm devoted to my mom. Anything that she wants, anything that she needs. So they're doing a junior high production of Willy Wonka. Now, as someone who happens to be junior high height, I got assigned the task of being the stunt double for the girl who turns into a blueberry. So the girl, she's singing her song. She runs around the back of a set piece, and then theater magic, out the other side, she is now a blueberry. The whole blow-up suit with the dress, the wig, shoes, blue face, and all. Well, originally, there was a morph suit mask in this particular role. However, when I come out on stage and I'm spinning and trying to make my way off the stage in a morph suit mask with the blow up suit and the wig and everything, kind of hard to see. And so during the soft opening where we bring in some sweet people from the retirement centers to come and watch the kids and where they can kind of like really click in, lock in before their opening that night. Yeah, so they were supposed to have a light off the side of the stage for me to kind of follow to get off, and they didn't. And then there was a kid who wasn't exactly where they were supposed to be. And so during the soft opening, I fell, and I thought I had just fallen like off stage, but I didn't exactly know where I was until I heard my mom on my earpiece going, "Oh my gosh, Abigail fell off the front of the stage. Someone make sure she's okay." I'm like, I'm in the audience? Oh my gosh. So yes, I thought I'd fallen off stage, but I thought like, you know, past the curtains, but like I literally like cartwheeled down the stairs, the side of the stage into a pile of stuff, and the kids kept dancing. Was you know, the ultimate the show must go on moment. They ended up doing some like blue makeup after that instead of the mask, and you know, thankful that I only fractured the side of my hand. And so, yes, that's the awkward story that I have to tell anytime anyone asks me what's the matter with my hand, and just hopefully we're really close. So now back to feminism and biblical femininity. Before we get into that conversation, you know, we have to talk about our sponsor of the Counteract Podcast, Patriot Mobile. And that's great because we love Patriot Mobile. Because if you're like so many Americans who've had enough of compromising, supporting companies that hate our values, then it's time to switch to Patriot Mobile, which is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. They're an example of putting the cause ahead of the profits, which is why we love Patriot Mobile at Counteract USA. Their dependable nationwide coverage gives you the exact same coverage you've been accustomed to without funding the left, because you have access to all three major networks. When you support Patriot Mobile, you support the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the sanctity of human life, and our veterans, military, and first responder heroes. Their 100% US-based customer service team makes switching super easy, so you can keep your number, you can keep your phone, or you can upgrade. Their team will help you find the best plan to fit your needs. Just go to patriotmobile.com/counteract or call 972-PATRIOT. You get 1 month free when you use offer code Counteract USA. So join us. Make the switch today. Go to patriotmobile.com/counteract. That's patriotmobile.com/counteract or call 972-PATRIOT. All right. So So the other day I put out a message to the girls in my Counteract cells, like, hey, so like, what do you guys want to talk about on the podcast? Like, what would be like helpful to hear? What is equipping? What's edifying? And one of my friends sent back, one thing that's been heavy on my mind is how many women voted Democrat this election due to my body, my choice, and the feminist movement. I feel that the biblical role of women is very undervalued in our country. I would love to hear more on how we as Christian women can/need to fight to lead biblical lives in a feminist world. And then another friend jumped off of that and she said, yeah, and I'd like to piggyback off of this and talk about how being a biblical woman doesn't mean you have to be a trad wife to be a feminine and biblical woman. So again, huge talking points. It seems like we're always coming back to this because there is this weird false dichotomy, and that's what we're going to, break down and jump into, because mainstream Marxism has been screaming oppressor, oppressed since the election, and that's not surprising. That you are, as a woman, are oppressed because, quote unquote, they're taking our rights away. And by taking our rights away, they mean that they think that the Trump administration is going to ban abortion, which from like a political standpoint doesn't even make sense, because when Roe v. Wade was overturned, let us be reminded, Roe v. Wade being overturned meant that the states now get to determine what their states do with abortion regulation. And as we're seeing across the country, with very few exceptions, a lot of states are making abortion and quote unquote abortion rights a part of their states' constitutions. The Trump administration is not doing anything about that. They're not even pro-life. They're not really even pro-life. So that's erroneous to begin with. But then let's just pause. I had someone leave a comment on a video that I made several weeks ago, and they said something about abortion rights, and that's just a really cringe phrase. Abortion rights aren't real. You mean the right that we made up in the 70s to kill our babies in the womb? Yeah, that's not a right protected under the Constitution. That's not found anywhere. And that's exactly what the Supreme Court decided in the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. So again, the feminists, the new wave feminists have bought into this idea that the only way that women can really be autonomous and free is if we have the autonomy and the freedom to kill our babies, to not be pregnant. And that goes back to lots of weird, funny conversations that we're seeing in liberal spheres right now, where they're like, ladies, if they want to take away our rights, then we are going to abstain from things that lead to having babies. Like as if abstinence is just this like really radical stance. It's really funny and it's really odd to see the trends, the conversations that are happening right now. So yes, there is no right to an abortion. There's no right to not have a baby. There's no right to have a baby. There's definitely not a right to not have a baby by means of killing your baby. So the idea that we're oppressed because you think erroneously that a certain administration is going to remove your fake right to kill someone, okay, we're messed up. That's crazy. Like there's so many mind games that have to happen to get you to that place, and that's where we have to reject postmodernism as Christians and say, okay, objectively, the truth is that if we determine life at any other moment than the moment of conception, that is erroneous and it is arbitrary. And so as quote unquote human rights advocates, we have to advocate for the right to life of the person in the womb. Logically, that is the clearest stance you can take. Biblically, that is the most biblical stance you can take. Feminism isn't empowering and it doesn't make sense. That's the bottom line there. I first started debating feminists in high school at my Christian school, mind you, talking about the gender wage gap. And they like these girls at my Christian school, and guys also, there were some simps that were siding with the feminists at my Christian school in the Bible Belt, talking about the gender wage gap and how women are oppressed because they make less money than men statistically. And we can do an episode about the gender wage gap later. But my argument it was literally me against the feminists, because the Christian guys in my class, with the exception of the simps, didn't feel like that they could say anything. They didn't feel like they had a voice. They didn't feel like they had a place at the table. And that's wrong. If their guys are still listening to this episode, you do have a place at the table. We saw that in the last election. Keep being based, guys. Keep being based. But in that conversation, my argument was my mom. My mom is a PhD statistician. That's right. My mom has taken all of the math classes available and emphasized in the grossest ones possible, the statistical ones. Now, my mom also has a degree in computer programming. Now, what is my mom's primary job? Well, you heard me a few moments ago talk about how she directs musicals at the private Christian school that I attended. She's a musical theater director who also teaches online classes for colleges, who also has designed patient onboarding databases for surgical centers in our area, just as one example. Now, here's how this works. She makes a lot more money when she's designing databases, when she's doing data analytics, than when she's teaching college, than when she's directing musicals. Ta-da! But guess what she enjoys the most as a woman who loves to create and nurture and work with kids? The musicals. Ta-da! Gender wage gap is not what we think it is. We don't have to have these Marxist oppressed ideas. Again, gender wage gap isn't the point here, but modern day feminism, feminist ideas, these oppressed victim mentality feminists, like, that's not empowering to anyone. However, in conservative culture, we've done a really good job of creating this sort of false dichotomy that if we reject feminism, then the default is we have to be Little House on the Prairie, prairie dress, sourdough making, baby raising conservatives who live on a farm and drink bone broth and don't wear shoes. Now, I'm not saying all those things are bad necessarily. I can't get down with a bone broth. That like literally freaks me out. I love a good prairie dress. I just got served in studio some sourdough pizza that was absolutely bomb. I love all of these things, but those aren't the only two options that we. Okay, I'm. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm trying to hold up a 2 here, and that's awkward because I'm holding up most of my fingers. Those aren't the only two options that we have as women. Like that you're a blue-haired feminist, or you have 6 babies and you're wearing a prairie dress. Because realistically, for a lot of us, especially those listening to this podcast, we are not married yet. We're not even dating anyone. That's not the season that God has us in. And if that's the season God's calling us to eventually, praise God. That's awesome. That is so cool. But if our only goal as conservative Christian women is to one day be married and have the farm and the eggs and the husband and the dog and the beige and the neutrals and the dresses, well, then we have set our hope, we have set our minds on so much less than what God has for us. And that is to draw near to Him, to make Christ known, to make disciples in the spheres that God has placed us in the seasons God has placed us in, which will change. Those seasons change. It's not either or. It's also not permanent. Obviously, there are extreme moral issues with modern day feminism. We just talked about that. And there aren't issues with the trad wife lifestyle. That's honorable. That's noble. But if we make that our obsession, our goal, well, then that isn't good. That's not edifying for us as believers. The reality is that there are some of us who maybe won't get married. And I think that you should get married if that's God's calling for you. But if we as Christian women feel like that in order to be fulfilled, we have to be married, that's not, I mean, it's different, but to say to be fulfilled, we have to be able to have all of these rights, abortion rights. If we find our fulfillment, our satisfaction in anything but Christ and Christ alone, then we're missing the mark. Obviously, having our hope in marriage and a family is a lot better than having our hope in abortion rights, quote unquote. Duh. Obviously, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not equating the two. However, what I am saying is that we have to fix our minds on Jesus. Paul says, I press on toward the goal of the prize of the upward calling of God in Christ Jesus, of making disciples, of proclaiming the gospel. And guess what? When you are a mom, Lord willing, yes, that's your mission field. Those are the disciples that you get to make. Before that, you are not off the hook. We are called to engage now, to live as biblical women now, being engaged now in the spheres of influence that God has placed us in. Don't be useless until you're married. That's dumb. Don't do that. But I get it. I definitely was in this season at one point in my life where I was striving for this picture of what biblical womanhood had to look like. And it was like, okay, get married, have the kids, the house, the dogs, the neutral, the iced coffee, like the whole shebang and Bible Belt culture. There's this picture that epitomizes what we think that a Christian woman should be. And I thought I had to achieve that in order to truly be fulfilled, in order to quote unquote make it. But that is so missing the mark. I was pursuing that instead of pursuing Christ. If you're married and living the trad wife life, then like, heck yeah, you go, girl. This is primarily for those of us who aren't or are struggling with trying to achieve this little house on the prairie lifestyle and it just isn't working. The reality is, even for some of you moms who are listening, you might be like a full-on like sweatpants queen who cleans with Clorox and is definitely using Swiss Miss this Christmas instead of bone broth hot chocolate. Also, if you make bone broth hot chocolate and I follow you on Instagram, like I will be swiping up. Like I've done that multiple times recently. I don't understand it. And you put bone broth in your hot chocolate. Just don't tell me. Okay. Like don't tell me if there's bone broth in my hot chocolate. If it's healthier for me, that's awesome. But like, I'm not drinking hot chocolate to get healthy. I'm drinking hot chocolate because it's cozy and it's Christmassy and it's yummy. My point in all of this is that feminist and trad wife aren't the only two categories of biblical femininity that exist, or a femininity that exists, because obviously being a blue-haired feminist that believes in abortion as freedom is not biblical whatsoever. And that Ballerina Farm standard of beauty isn't the only goal of us, for those of us who reject liberal feminism. And I was going to say biblical femininity, that Ballerina Farm femininity isn't the standard of biblical femininity, but Ballerina Farm's Mormon. So yeah, not biblical femininity at all. But you get it. Like the picturesque idea of like making everything from scratch and making your own clothes and doing all that. Like that's awesome. But do not sit idly by until that is a reality in your life. Or do not sit idly by, and because that might not ever be a reality for our lives. The reality is that we are called to make disciples, to fulfill the Great Commission now. We are called to be the hands and feet of Jesus now. We can't be waiting for our Prince Charming worship pastor guy and be useless in the meantime. You've heard it in a billion sermons and self-help books, but believe me when I tell you that our calling to make disciples does look unique in each season. So where does God have you now? What people has God given you influence over now? If we can be effective in being living proof of who God is, not shying away from our beliefs as Christians, pressing in and being intentional with the Christians around us now, that's what biblical femininity looks like in a feminist culture. If we say, no, we reject abortion narratives, we reject feminist narratives because of our belief in God, not because of our belief in femininity. It's not feminist or feminine. It's feminist or biblical. It's secular or biblical. It's postmodern or biblical. That is the reality. It's either for God or against him. So being a biblical woman in a feminist culture is respecting biblical gender roles, letting men be men. But that means we also have to fulfill our role in culture and in the church. And that looks like serving, discipling, getting coffee with your friend, being bold for the gospel in awkward settings, being obedient in the spheres of influence, in the work, in the jobs, in the role that God has placed us in right now, not letting even a moment pass us by. We talked about this last week on the last episode. We can't let these opportunities pass us by, the next 4 years that we have to reclaim aspects of our culture for biblical truth. Girls, I almost like went into like full on like elastic, like, girls, come on, saving the world to the men. I don't think so. I don't think so. I also should do a whole episode about how The Incredibles is an awesome rejection of Marxism and socialism, but that's also not today. But seriously, like, girls, in the least feminist way possible, we do have a responsibility to reclaim aspects of our culture for the sake of the gospel. That's where we can step in with grace and truth, rejecting these feminist ideas and ideals and narratives, and say, no, we want biblical gender roles. We want biblical truth in our policy. We want a more Christian society, not because our government is a theocracy, but because Christians are speaking up and having a voice. And girls, we're a part of that. We really, really are. That's how we reclaim feminine narratives in our culture. We have to offer the girls of our generation a better way, and that's a relationship with Jesus. If you're in a relationship right now where you're like, hey, listen, like, I don't know how edifying this is. I can't pursue my relationship with Christ because all I'm doing is maintaining this relationship with this guy, or I'm being idle in my relation, in my life and my opportunities because I really want to be married. Like, again, like, I get you. I almost didn't break up with my Christian boyfriend because I was afraid of being single. He was a Christian guy, but I wasn't growing in my relationship with Christ because I was too focused on that relationship. I was too focused on achieving the standard of what I thought biblical femininity was. I was terrified of breaking up with him because I was like, what if I'm single for like 2 years? What if I'm single forever? What if I'm single for like a year? What if I'm single for 2 years? Well, ladies, I'm pleased to inform you that it has been 4 years since I have had a boyfriend at all, and God has done more in my personal walk with him than I could ever have imagined, which I know will equip me to be a better wife and mom one day. Trust God and his timing for real, but like, that means not his timing for when eventually, finally, one day you'll be rescued by a biblical relationship. Like, yeah, like, again, like, that's noble. It really is. But do not be idle. Do not be idle. Be engaged now. Be active now. Serve in your church now. Make disciples now. Be involved in pro-life activism now. Have conversations with your friends. Get coffee and engage in the awkward conversations for the sake of the gospel now. There are women throughout the Bible that were effective in all sorts of spheres of influence. Again, that's not feminist. It's just rejecting that there is this false dichotomy that you can either be a new wave feminist or you must be married. And if you are something in the middle, then you are useless and must be striving toward the certain picture of what femininity looks like. No, pursue Christ. Be obedient with the opportunities that he's given you. And that's it. Make disciples. Rest in him. Don't be striving after some picture of what we're told femininity looks like. And that's how we rewrite the feminist narratives of our culture. Our feminist friends that think that they have to have their freedom and bodily autonomy. No, that's where we step in and say, no, freedom is found in Christ alone. Know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Jesus is the only way, the truth, and the life. Be unashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes. To everyone who believes. And that's our hope as Christians, as women. Press in. Lean in. Don't be a victim of your circumstances. Don't be a victim of striving. Lean into Christ and Christ alone. Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Counteract Podcast. If you're not subscribed to the Counteract Podcast, subscribe. Send this to a friend. Follow us on social media. If you're wanting to get involved with Counteract USA, go online, fill out our Get Involved form. Someone will get back to you. We're super excited about all God is doing here at Counteract USA. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.